Welcome to another episode of Growing Eccommerce. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Ryan.
My name is Chris.
Our other host. And today we've got some pretty exciting topics lined up for you. We're going to focus on Chinese commerce efforts abroad, something we haven't talked about in a while. So what's up with JD? What's up with Shein? What's up with
Temu!
Yeah, podcast favorite, Temu. Yeah.
Now you have to stay on the podcast, ladies and gents.
Exactly.
There is no better topic than Temu.
No. Well, there's one better topic, and we're going to end with a patent, a pretty juicy
Holy
patent.
shit. This is one of the craziest things I've heard for a long time.
Yes.
I'm not kidding.
I agree with you. It's a Google patent. God bless, there are Google patent watchers. I'm not one of them, but someone shared this online and really appreciate that because it's the patent is it's juicy.
No clickbait. This is really crazy.
Yes.
This is going down. But yeah, we'll unpack it.
Let's get
what
into
a great episode ahead of us, man. Right?
Yeah, I'm excited, Chris.
I love it. Let's start with some news.
Exactly. So
you want to start?
I'll kick us off. Chinese commerce, okay?
Your favorite topic.
My favorite, most hated topic. Yes, my favorite, least favorite topic.
What's going on with our friends from the East?
Well, they continue to view Europe, the US, other international markets as well as dinner.
Dinner. I would call it growth potential, but yeah,
I would call it
dinner.
I call it dinner.
Yeah.
And the situation has become a bit more challenging in the US due to like tariffs and so on. But so Europe is quite relevant for them.
Yes.
And we know that Shein and Temu, they're working really hard to expand their local kind of fulfillment and local inventory and get European brands and retailers selling on their platform. They're actually rather scornful of the retailers, but getting brands and manufacturers on the platform and retailers too, if they can, they won't say no to someone being on their platform, I guess. But they're trying to build up inventory and stock. So in one of the latest moves, Shein has opened a new center in Barcelona. So we just see that
they're serious about it.
Yeah, they're serious. It's intensifying. And Spain is quite an interesting market. I want to talk about Temu in a sec, but anything you want to add here, Chris?
No, what I would like to add is to all the listeners who are kind of interested in the German e-commerce market, there were basically good news out there, right? That the German e-commerce market grew again.
It did what?
Yes, it grew. And quite substantially. But if you look at the numbers, most of the growth is coming from players which I'm not too happy about.
Yeah.
Which are the big ones, from China.
Yeah.
And I think that the landscape hasn't changed. They have massively deep pockets. They can operate on a loss per conversion for I think quite some time. And I think they will see us even more as thinner because the domestic demand in China is not as strong as it used to be, right? So their growth strategy has to be going into new markets. And Europe has become one major market for them. So I think for the online retailer based in Europe, times will get tougher, unfortunately. So nothing new here, but just basically confirmation, right?
Yeah. I think what hurts most, it just feels so asymmetrical or so one-sided. Because how often do you really hear about brands or retailers from Europe or from the US successfully entering the Chinese market or even wanting to enter that market?
Because they can't. And now it maybe even gets political. We have to be careful here. But let's face it, China is probably not playing a fair game here because it's one-sided for sure. Yeah. And you can look at any industry you want. Look at the car industry. BYD is sucking big time in China. I think they're now 40% year-over-year drop the first 2 months.
Wow.
What they're doing is they have to unload their mess, right?
Yeah.
On new markets. Europe is one of them. So you can see it everywhere. I'm not a big fan of it. At the end of the day, I don't know how much the online retailers, the European online retailers can do here. At the end of the day, it's certainly also about us, the end consumer, right?
Yeah.
Are you willing to buy
Wow.
this shit.
Let's get into that, because it seems like people are.
Yeah. The numbers confirm that, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, all is fair in love and war and e-commerce. So
yes.
But let's move on to let's do JD first. Okay.
Yes.
So JD is expanding into Europe pretty aggressively with their Joybuy platform.
And the Media More.
Yeah,
acquisition. I mean, we must not forget this.
Yeah, they're acquiring local players, like almost as big as it gets, MediaMarkt. Yeah. So that is what it is. But yeah, I mean, Joybuy, as soon as I found out that they're launching in Europe, I was like, well,
hold on, what's going on here?
They must be buying Google Shopping ads, because you can't launch in Europe without buying Google Shopping ads. That's what we saw with Temu. It's what we've seen with AliExpress and with others in the past. Even right now, we see Trendyol, which is actually a Turkish e-commerce platform, but they're now also largely owned by China, and they're pushing super hard in advertising in Eastern Europe, probably as a testing ground.
He might be suffering big time. Big time. But I think they feel the pressure here.
Yeah, definitely. And Allegro, well, we'll get to that. I mean,
Well, whereas Allegro numbers are not even that bad, but let's unpack it.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk, like, Joybuy, I had a look at this, and in the month of March, which is the most recent data available, we were finding them as an account level competitor for over 6% of the accounts, which isn't a huge number yet, but it's not nothing either.
It's not nothing either, and there's the trajectory.
Exactly. And by the way, I looked at because I looked at this rather quickly, and this is that's 6% of all of the accounts in all of the target countries. And they're not active in all the target countries yet. So if we look where they're active, I'll have to filter that in the future. I'm sure there'll be updates, but and the concern is that like you said, the trajectory, what kind of momentum are they going to have here? Are we going to end up with Temu 2.0?
There's, I think, a certain probability. And again, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just, we talked about that in detail, one of our episodes, the CPC, rising CPCs, right? This is the one dark cloud every retailer sees and suffers from.
Yeah.
Another player who probably doesn't care that much about the return on invest, especially for new clients. I mean, there's a certain probability that CPC inflation will be triggered again by such dominant players. So it's not, I mean, honestly, it's not good news. No, I don't like it at all.
It's a metaphor. Tell me if it's a stretch metaphor, but I'm thinking of, like, in the U.S. housing market, you hear about these big institutional investors buying homes, and although I think they're trying to limit that practice now, but it's just not fair.
No, it's not fair.
And that's what, like, we see the Google Shopping auctions, and there's these battles of titans. Like, if JD starts fighting Temu in Europe's e-commerce advertising landscape,
it's not good.
And Amazon's in the mix, and no, it's ugly. It's ugly.
And the crazy thing is, and we talked about that briefly before the podcast. It's amazing where, for instance, Temu, in which areas and segments Temu is active in.
Yeah.
We talk to clients where they think Temu can't be a topic. And then you see they are literally everywhere. And another big player from China will lead to probably rising CPCs. It is what it is. And this brings me back, by the way, to my statement that what's the way out here? I think certain things you can't control, that's for sure. But let's be sure that you do your homework.
Yeah.
Squeeze everything out of the algorithms. Google, Microsoft, let them work as smart as possible for you.
Yes.
Because the environment won't get easier.
Yeah. I mean,
it's really, these details will matter more if these whales just flood the market with shitty products and money.
I know. Yeah, like, everyone's worried about AI, the pace of change and stuff like that, but I think these are the clear and present dangers.
Yes.
And there's so much, I think it's very important that every advertising dollar is prioritized, and every product has a advertising plan or priority to it, because you're just fighting these wars of attrition in many cases.
1000%. And another metaphor, let's maybe it's a stretch, but I listened to a great podcast yesterday about the great authors and writers in history, and Nietzsche was one of them.
Yeah.
And what Nietzsche made so special was that literally every sentence had a purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't want to get emotional about it, but everything you do in this environment you're active now as an e-commerce expert, there has to be a purpose behind every move.
Yes.
Don't be lazy.
Yes.
Because it won't get easier.
No, because yeah, sadly, these kind of pressures can get existential, and like that means at a campaign level, everything you do needs to have a reason for being, a reason to exist. It needs to be part of that strategy.
1000%. Because my assumption is that these big players with these deep war chests, I think they won't go this last mile.
Yeah.
And again, Google did a lot of stuff right. You can do things now again to outsmart competition.
Yes.
So anyway, but no good news here. You have good news from the Chinese e-commerce front.
If you're Temu, it's good. So one thing that I do. So let's talk about monthly active users. Yeah. Okay, I'm actually a 6 monthly active user of Temu. Once every 6 months, I visit their website. I go to their transparency center where they are required by European regulation to submit certain facts, and I dig up their monthly active users. So that's the kind of active user I am at Temu. And yeah, their latest batch of monthly active user data goes for the second half of 2025. Yes. So, I mean, it's interesting. I've done a couple of things there. Like, sadly, there's some, due to when they started reporting, it was already partway through 2024. So it's hard to do good year-over-year reporting yet for them because their cadence was weird. But we can look at against the previous period, and we can see that. So in H2 or second half of 2025, overall, they grew 12% compared to the previous period. And I mean, I have mixed feelings about that because that is I actually think that is rather flat when you consider that there's a lot of seasonality in the second half of the year.
And for Temu levels.
And for Temu levels. So, I mean, maybe there's some comfort here. Yeah. But as we'll talk about in a second, they've already captured a lot of market share. So I think at this point, it's only natural that the growth starts to slow down.
Curve of diminishing returns.
But it's not equal across all markets. So slower markets include Germany and France, which are at like 8 and 9% respectively. And then below that 12% overall average. And then Italy and Spain are growth markets for them at 16 and 17%. And that ties back, we mentioned Shein opening up business in Barcelona. I think, it's a growth market for them too. And so, yeah.
Yeah, we can be sure about it. There are certain markets which are even more interesting, right?
Yeah, but hold on, I would also say like Spain and Italy, I actually feel like they are curiously undefended in some ways. Like, I think they don't have the clear homegrown incumbents like of a Zalando in Germany,
True that.
For example, or like Allegro in Poland, we mentioned, like
Denmark, Romania.
Yeah, exactly. Bol in Netherlands. Like the Zalando of Spain is Zalando.
Yeah,
so
you're right. I've never thought about this. Your point on here. Because do you have numbers for Netherlands? Because Netherlands is for me one of the most hard markets to crack because you have so many big players there.
Yeah.
Dutch players which are so good at what they're doing. Do you have numbers for Netherlands?
Sure. Netherlands saw 9%. 9%. So also similar to France.
Okay.
Yeah. Similar,
but below average.
Below,
Makes sense.
Makes sense. But speaking of Poland, so I mentioned that I also calculated market share, and Poland has it just about the worst, at least of the highest volume markets. And so what I did here, because I think people have tried to estimate Temu's market share before, and at least what I've seen, it hasn't been to me very convincing. It's like, maybe some similar web data stitched together with something they found on Statista, and I'm just not so sure about that. But what we can do here, we've got these monthly active users that I would be hesitant to fudge that data if I were them, because they're reporting this to the European governments, or like to the European Commission. And then we can also take Europe reports through Eurostat. They have their official numbers on the total amount of e-commerce users. So I think if you take Temu's monthly active users and divide that by Europe's data on e-commerce users, you've got a pretty accurate, rock solid market share calculation. So overall for Europe, drum roll, that's a 40% market share. And this is to the, Europeans have a choice of where they buy from, and we talked about the asymmetry, and Europeans have a choice here, but they choose to buy from Temu a lot. And that's why there are these markets where you wouldn't necessarily, you can get in a B2B niche where you think like, but Temu has every kind of shit on there, and people will buy based on price. They will. So
you want me to comment on that?
Do you want to?
Yeah, my comment are, I'm out of words.
Yeah,
but because this is not good. By the way, not for the fact that I don't like Temu in general. I think the business model, it seems like works.
It works.
It works. It works, but it's not a fair race. A, and B, again, it's asymmetrical, right? I don't know any big brands going to China.
Yeah, and you hear it's not a retail example, but Starbucks was a huge disaster in China. If Apple has been a disaster in China, that's talk about asymmetry. China has benefited massively from Apple's manufacturing in there, but Apple having China as a consumer market, it just hasn't really worked.
You want to hear a crazy stat? By the way, maybe we get fact checked here, and I want to disclaim, I don't know if this is true. I read a fun fact about Apple. Apple has invested into the Chinese economy more than the Marshall Plan volume.
Somehow I knew you were going to say, I believe it.
Can you imagine that?
China is the Marshall, Apple is the Marshall Plan of China. Yeah. No, there's a whole book. Oh man, I think it's called Apple in China. And it is, to be honest, I've only listened to interviews with the author and read some articles and stuff, because I don't have time to read a whole book about that. But I am thoroughly convinced by that thesis that Apple built China. But we're a little off topic. But
anyway, so 40%
back to market share. Yeah. So
I'm interested in now. Where is Temu? What are the strongest markets for Temu?
Yes. So let's run down by. This is listed. This is in order of their top 5 largest markets. Germany is their largest single market, and that market share is 44% just about. So it's a bit above the 40%. France, second largest market, also above at 42%. And then Italy, what do you think about this? 59% market share. Spain, 49%. And this is the last number we'll read off, but I mentioned Poland in the hook for this. Poland, 71.1% market share that Temu has.
Solid work.
Yes.
Temu. Yes. Shout out. By the way, this Poland number is somehow interesting, because they would have a very strong homegrown marketplace with Allegro.
Yes.
And I read some numbers that Allegro is doing fine. I think they also project solid growth for 2026.
Yeah.
But that number is crazy, Mike.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, I think Allegro is at 7 to 10% projection, and Temu was at 8% growth in Poland. Right. So they're growing at a similar. But and I don't know Allegro's market share, but I still getting back to this theme of the war of attrition or the clash of the titans. I mean, if you're any other business in Poland,
you have an issue.
I think that Allegro takes a rather non-antagonistic stance toward other retailers and stuff. They're not trying to be the Amazon of Poland exactly. They want to do business, but it's just
I had the chance to talk to some high-level Allegro guys a couple of years ago. Seem to come across really good people, know what they're doing, and it's funny, they really cared about e-commerce as an industry for their country. And by the way, Poland as a country is doing tremendously well.
Yeah.
Macroeconomically, but especially the e-commerce development there is crazy. So shout out to our Polish friends here.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what their penetration rate is, but I assume they have a bit of headroom to catch up on it.
Headroom to catch up the market, and yeah, they're doing well. But the 70% market share is just
nuts.
But if this wasn't enough, man, there's another topic we want to unpack.
Yes.
We have enough time?
I don't know. Yeah, let's go for it.
Is it not possible, or is it necessary at the same time? I don't know. We have been talking about the future of e-commerce for quite some time now.
Yeah.
The future of e-commerce, and we were provoking the online retailers here because we stated down the line there will be the zero-click event. The purchase will happen within the ad environment.
Yes.
And your poor online retailer will be not more than a warehouse for Google. Right. There's some. It's provoking, but it is what it is.
Yes.
It might happen that way. Now, the UCP happened.
Yes.
Which is a clear sign of Google doubling down on that strategy. And another thing happened, or another indication popped up that the zero-click event is a serious thing, and it might become reality very, very soon.
Yeah. So with that, thank you for setting me up. Let's get into
it's all about you.
To the patent. Yeah. So, January 3rd of last year, this patent was submitted by Google. And props to them, because I think on January 3rd of 2024, I was still hungover from New Year's Eve. I'm not getting younger. Those hangovers, man, they last. But they were busy filing a big old patent. And then in late January of this year, so just over a year later, that patent was granted. And so you can go to the patent office and see this. I'm not going to read the patent number out loud, because that'd take too long. But
it's 12 pages, right? It's quite some, or more.
I don't know how many pages it is.
Okay.
It's a lot of pages, I think. 15. Yeah, 15 pages. Yeah. So,
what this patent is about.
Yeah, let's finally cut to the chase here. So this patent is called AI-generated content page tailored to a specific user, which, like all patent titles, sucks. And the abstract is even worse. But if you get into actual patent text, you can start to figure out.
It would be a bad headline for an article.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what this does, this is personalized landing page replacement. So that, just to spell out what this means, okay? There's a couple core components here, and one of them is a scoring model. Now, we know that Google for years has been scoring landing pages, landing page
for
experience.
Ad rank.
Yes, it's part of the ad rank calculation. And they are, so I don't know if this is an evolution of that or if it's a completely new model. I'm not quite sure about that. But they're going to be scoring your landing pages, and if your landing page doesn't make the cut, then they will basically vibe code a replacement landing page on the fly that the user will be directed to instead.
Hold on. Two questions which come to my mind. Who decides about the very critical question, is my landing page going to make the cut? Is this somehow transparent to me? Is this, of course, in the decision power of Google, I assume?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about it?
Sure. There's a list of some of the things which I don't think claims to be comprehensive, but it's the system decides.
The system
decides,
okay.
Yes. Because you have to imagine how amazing this technology is if it can really work like that. They have to let AI kind of hallucinate a landing page into existence in auction time. They have to evaluate your landing page and replace it like...
It's scary.
Yeah. It's insane.
It's scary because this is, ladies and gents, this is what this patent is about. Because I had to wrap my head around it because it seems so unreal. The system decides whether your landing page is good enough, yes or no, and then basically kind of in real time, Google creates a new landing page.
Yes.
Which is going to make the cut.
Yeah.
Of course, because it's from Google. And Mike, now the second question is that landing page.
Well, hold on. Speak it out.
Is this landing page, or whatever we want to call it, is this still in the ad system? Where's this hosted?
Let's get back. Let's just backtrack for 1 sec, because I want to talk about how the system makes decisions. Okay, and then we'll get to where the user is going. So let's see here. It can make this decision based on the conversion rate associated with your landing page.
Okay. Historical conversion rate.
Historical. Yeah. The click-through rate.
All right.
The bounce rate. The based on a qualitative factor. The qualitative factor being page design quality or content quality. Yeah. So I just want to tease out, that's not quantitative. That is a qualitative, in other words, judgment-based decision.
So if they don't like my green on my landing page,
it wasn't Google green. There's a hex code for Google green.
You don't get a photo.
No.
Okay.
But there's more, like, for example, you can, like, if you don't have product filter on there, there's a bunch of criteria in here. So if your landing page doesn't have product filters on there, to them that's unacceptable, and they can replace it with their vibe coded. I shouldn't call it vibe code, but their vibe coded landing page that does have a product filter on it. Right. Yes. So
okay. So there is at least a catalog of criteria to look at.
Yeah.
Some of these criteria are highly intransparent, and you're completely in the hands of Google.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. Maybe they'll report on your reasons for replacement. Yeah. Maybe they will, but
they will do
in some form.
Anyway, may I come back to this question? Can we call this a landing page, or what? Or
no, it's not a landing page.
What is it?
In my opinion, because they're not vibe coding on your website. You know, they
code within the ads ecosystem.
This is basically an ad unit. Like, the user is more or less a sleeper in the matrix. They click on this, thinking that they're clicking on a link or an ad that's going to direct them to your merchant website, but they are effectively an expanded ad. The landing page is basically part of the ad.
So it's an ad artifact.
Yeah.
Disguised as landing page.
Yes, and there's some brand, like, you know, they're going to reflect some of your branding, your colors or fonts. Maybe we'll see to what extent.
Yeah, probably.
But it's not gonna. I don't think it's going to be a one-to-one clone of your website. It's going to be a facsimile, a lookalike, or copy.
Better version, hopefully. Yeah,
that's what they say. Yeah,
but this is very important. So it's not So it's not on the website of the client. It's within the ads system.
Yeah.
And my question would be then, okay, has this ads artifact disguised this landing page, has this functionality? Can I buy on it? Can I click the add to cart or whatever? Yeah. Probably, right?
Yeah, there are different things that can go on here, but you can, at least because they use the phrase in some, like, really there's line after line of text that begins with the phrase in some instances. So they're keeping this very open-ended about how it will behave or what criteria can go in. But in some instances, they can complete a purchase on that landing page for sure.
Okay. Ladies and gents, this is massive.
Yeah.
So the patent itself, so they are serious about it, of course, and it's massive. And I know that the story is, again, great. The average online retailer, if you have problems with your website, don't care. We take care of it.
I wonder what Shopify thinks about this, though, too.
It's the big ones.
Yeah, but
because can you opt out of it? Yeah, we don't know yet.
Well, we don't know. And someone, Joanna, I have to find out what her last name was. I saw her she wrote a great newsletter about this online, and she was saying that there's no opt out in the patent, and that's concerning. I don't really see it that way because, this is describing the system behavior, and an opt-out is a level above that. For sure. You would be in Google Ads and you'd have your opt-in, opt-out option. I think that's not really part of the system per se, I would say. But like, you know how they do this stuff though. They opt in things by default and so on, and they'll push it as the greatest thing.
It will be the sales narrative, high conversion. By the way, so we were kind of, at least I was probably kind of very critical here because, again, it's a massive forward integrating move by Google.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there might be positives here because, of course, I mean, if they are really doing this, if they execute on it, and I really get this perfect landing page, and my conversion rate gets boosted. I mean, down the line, there are silver linings here that this could be good.
That's true, and like, in fairness here, you know, the first or that phrase in the title, a page tailored to a specific user. So this is personalized. They know things about this person's browsing history and stuff like that. They know because they have the audience graph. They have
mapping,
some in market symbols. Losing my word here. Some in market signals and other kinds of signals, things that they know about that user. So, and you know, if this is, let's say that this is inside of AI mode and there's been a whole conversation there, like, they can better reflect that context in this landing page. And that could be an upside of this for sure. So I don't want to just completely shit all over it, but it's a very, you know, we talk about PMax-ification on this podcast before, and you know, like, I talk about what is a PMax because it's a whole category of campaigns, but it just gets broader and broader to, like, you know, there's the automated bidding, automated targeting, automated creative, automated placements, and
automated landing pages.
Yeah, if you boil that stuff away, it's like, well, what's left? There's your feed, there's your landing pages, and then there'll even be automated landing pages.
Again, and how can you differentiate, right? I mean, the website, for so many retailers, that is the core, right? Where so there's a lot of things. I mean, we have to talk about that in another episode for sure. This is big. This is really big.
Yeah, it is. But another thing I want to mention, this could take potentially years to materialize.
Again,
because,
like agentic commerce, right? It's not happening overnight.
I feel like there's this contradiction here where, like, they're asking for all these detailed conversational attributes in your feed so that AI has better grounding and it can do, because it's hard for them to do this, or they would have to read all your landing pages. So on the one hand, they don't want to exert the effort to read your landing pages, and they're saying, please do that for us. Give us all this structured data. But on the other hand, they'll say, we're going to analyze your landing page and just effing replace it. So, like, these things to me are contradictory, and I have to think that through in more detail. But
it's big news, and it's certainly it fuels the hypothesis that this in chat purchase, the 0-click buy event, Google doubles down on that.
Yes.
By the way, on another note, Neo in Matrix had the chance to choose the pill.
Yes.
I'm as a poor online retailer, I don't even know it.
Well,
I can't choose. It is now really the website of the retailer I want to buy, or is it?
I have a lot of questions here. Like, if you're the user and you think you visited a website, but you didn't, like, because what if you want to, like, go somewhere else in their site navigation? I have questions about this, how this will really work.
Google will figure it out.
And to be fair, I haven't read all 15 pages, to be perfectly honest, but
we should do a follow-up here.
Yeah.
But certainly big news.
Yeah, and just imagine, by the way, I mean, one last thing, since this is not on your web property, you don't have you're tracking your data. You know, you don't know the browsing behavior, the session data.
This is probably the biggest disadvantage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm rather negative on this one.
Me too.
Okay.
So
I hope it came across that way.
Listen, we ended the episode on a negative note, like we always like to do.
Like we always like to do.
Yes.
Problems are so much more fun than solutions. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah. It's all about solutions, but we don't have a solution here.
Well,
it might be just a problem for now.
It's something we have to wait and watch a bit as well. So
yes.
Yeah. But I think it's an interesting one. I hope you thought so too.
Time flies, Mike.
Yep. Let's wrap it up.
Always. Thanks. Thank you, sir.
It was a pleasure, Chris. And thank you for listening. This has been, as always, a production of Smarter E-commerce, also known as SMEC. To learn more, you can visit smarter-ecommerce.com. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or give us a like, mention us on social media. We really appreciate it. Thanks. We'll see you next time.